Do a review in the Kutta Sichas and Chelek of Gimel in volume 23. This is the second Sicha for the portion of Korach. After the story with the Machlokes of Korach, the Torah talks about giving the Matnas Kahuna to the Kohanim. There was a challenge to the Kohanim, to Aaron and his son, and the Eibishter therefore promised him that he's going to give him, or they're going to get the 24 presents that we give to the Kohanim. And there's a Rashi over here, basically a Rashi Sikha, and the Rebbe compares this Rashi to the source of Rashi and explains that we see that there is some differences. Rashi changes around, and the Rebbe will explain Rashi's view over here. Let's go step by step. In Posik, Vaidaber Hashem el Aaron. So Hashem speaks to Aaron, and he says, "Va'ani hinei nosati l'cho es mishmeres trumoisai gomer." I've given you the guard of my truma. Stolz Rashi oif va'ani hinei nosati l'ch. Here I have given to you. Und sagt zwei inyonim, and Rashi says two aspects over here. They're both written in the Sifri in different languages. Rashi brings down in one Rashi two seemingly separate pieces of Sifri. What is the idea, first of all, of why is Hashem giving him these matnas kuhuna? And then Rashi says that why is it given that and why is it placed next to the Maaseh Korach? So what does Rashi say? Aleph, as vi ani hine nosati l'cho, says hine nosati l'cho. I behold, I've given to you. What does the word hine mean? So first is the first piece of Rashi on Sifri. Main b'simcha. This means joy. With joy I've given to you. Rashi brings a support that the word hine means joy. Kimoi, like we find in the Posik, when Aaron was coming to Moshe, so Hashem is saying to Moshe, hine hu yoytze likro secha. Behold, he's going to come out towards you. And when he'll see you, he'll be very happy in his heart. He'll rejoice. So the word hine, meaning he'll go out, not just he'll come out towards you, but he'll come out and he'll be happy in his heart, even though, as the Rebbe will articulate later on, Aaron was the older brother and Moshe Rabbeinu was getting the entire mission of taking out the Yidden. So the Eibishter says he would, with happiness, he will go out towards you and he'll be happy in his house. So this is first thing from the Sifri. Sifri is a little shorter. Rashi is Mairich u'moisif oif loshen ha-Sifri. Rashi is more lengthy. He's a lot longer. And he adds to the language of the Sifri. Instead of just saying b'simcha, with joy, he says loshen simcha huzeh. This is a loshen simcha. So the Rebbe explained why Rashi has to add the words loshen simcha huzeh, because this is not the usual hine we have hundreds of times in the Torah. It doesn't mean always. Rashi is saying hine hu, that zeh simcha huzeh. This particular one is simcha when we have evidence for that. Al derech hapshat is hine nit umetun aloshen simcha. According to Pshat, hine is not always a language of joy. Nor blois when es is fran ahechrech zu teichen azay. Only when we have to, there is some proof evidence that we have to translate it such. Under far, and therefore, is Rashi medayik loshen simcha huzeh. That's why Rashi says specifically that in this case it's a lashon simcha, so you don't confuse that every time hinei simcha. That's the first thing that Rashi writes. Beis, Rashi says, as der Tam of der Smichas von der Parsha, wegen Matnes Kuna zu Meise Korach, the reason why this portion that talks about Matnes Kuna, this comes, why was it next to Meise Korach, to the story of Korach? What's the connection to Korach with the Matnes Kuna? Is move on from Rashi says, understood, Moshul Melech Shenosan Sodel Le'oyabay. We can understand it from a moshul, a king who has given a field to his friend, but he didn't document it, didn't write it down. So one comes and challenges the gift that the king gave him. So the king says, anybody who wants is going to come and complain against you. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to sign it. And I will have it notarized in the courts to certify that this is a good document. So that Moshe Afkan, says Rashi, also here. Because Korach came and he complained against Aaron about the Kuna. So Bo HaKosuf, so the pasuk is coming here. V'nosan loich of daled matnes Kuna, giving him the 24 gifts of Kuna, and he's given to him b'bris melach olam, a covenant of eternity, like salt, as Rashi says, salt never gets ruined. So made a covenant forever. And Rashi adds and concludes, that's why this parsha has been brought over here. But these two aspects that Rashi explains, that hine means besimcha, and also the other idea that it's brought here to sort of to ratify, confirm the kahuna of Aaron because of Korach arguing against it, seem to have no real connection between them. Why does Rashi bring it down in the same Rashi? So we need to understand this. It would seem that these two ideas don't really have a connection amongst themselves. And as we see, the way they are recorded in the Sifri, als besondere droshes, they're separate expounding pieces. Und auf andere Wörter, and on different words in the pasuk. Aber Rashi is a koil in themselves dibra maschil, but Rashi includes them in the one Rashi, the one word that begins from the pasuk. Ubehem shechecho, then one flow. So what's the connection between these two things? Base. Euch darf man verstehen. Nachdem wie der Sifri sagt der Moshul, after he says the Moshul Sifri, is a Messiah dem Nimshul Vazel L'Sheiner. Bo Korach v'irer ala Kahuna connected. Korach came and argued in the Kahuna. Amar Lei Hamokim. So in the Sifri it says Hashem says to him. Hashem is the one. Hashem says, "Kol mishayiritz yarer connect the chalakuna." Boy, anybody who's gonna want to argue on the kuna is gonna come. But I am gonna write. I'm gonna sign, and I'm gonna bring it up and ratify it in court. But Rashi doesn't say hamokim. Rashi is of Messiah dem Nimshul. Now, as we've quoted, Afkan liv shebo koirach v'ira connected Aaron, because he argued against Aaron. Alakuna, it's a bo hakosuv. This pasuk comes v'nosan loichav daled matnes kahuna bebris melech olam. The pasuk gave him the kahuna bebris melech olam. So the Rebbe is going to want to know some of the changes of Rashi the Sifri. The Rebbe's question is going to be why in Sifri it says Hashem gave it to him, and by us it says the Pasuk gave it to him. But first, the Rebbe says like this: Es is verstandig. We do understand Favos Rashi is Messiah Nidvi in Sifri, where Rashi concludes, unlike the Sifri, Vani Koisev Chulu Choisev. So over there it says writing and signing it, but Rashi doesn't bring down Rashi just brings down because he wants to translate what is it that the Eibishter wrote to him. That this is what the Eibishter gave him, the 24 matnas kuna b'bris konos ha'olam. That is the writing. That is Boa Kosu v'nosam loy. But it doesn't. This is what the pasuk is doing here by writing down the 24 matnas kuna. But the Sifri Darfnes doesn't need zogen. The Sifri doesn't need to say this, that the Eibishter gave him the Chav Daled Matnas Kuhuna as a Matnas Kuna Soilom. It just says when he it doesn't say the Eibishter gave it to him, because in the Sifri it's already said before. But Rashi needs to say this. Mashiach in the Sifri, Darfer doesn't need zogen. He doesn't need to say this. While in Sifri, Weisman does from Freya. In Sifri, you know this from before. Hey, there is the moshel. Before he says the moshel is a magdim. Koras hakosu brisim aren al kocha kadoshim. That the Eibishter formed a covenant with Aaron on the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Lifishabok Korach connected Aaron the Irer Kahuna. So because he complained on the Kahuna, so it says already that the Eibishter gave him the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That was part of the. That says in the Sifri first. The Riber. He doesn't have to repeat it again. After the Moshe, he just says that he signs it and writes it and doesn't have to say that he gave the 24 Matnas Kahuna because that's already written in the Sifri earlier. So that difference we understand. As his ober need move on, but we don't understand. Aleph. Why does Rashi say the Pasuk came and gave him? And not in Sifri Hamokim. Sifri says Hashem gave it to him, and here it says that the Pasuk gave it to him. And number two, why? Okay, we said we have to mention he gave him the Matnas Kahuna, but why say a number? So Livos Zokt Rashi of Daled Matnas Kahuna. Why does Rashi say 24 Matnas Kahuna? The mind of Kamina do the misper for the Matnas Kuna. What? Why is it important over here to know that it's 24? But I should get up zogen and also like Matnas Kahuna b'bris melach. He gave him the gifts of Kahuna and a covenant for eternity. Nochmer. Not only that it's not important to know 24. We don't even have 24 in the Psukim here. Noch mehr in die Psukim da werden ausgerechnet nicht alle Chavdal Matnas Kuna. They're not enumerated, all the 24 Matnas Kuna. As werden nicht der Mond, the Matonis von Chala, the gift that you give to the Kohen, the Chala, the Reish is, I guess, the first of the sharing. Zroya L'chayayim V'keva, the leg and the cheeks and the stomach, that's the gifts for the Kohen. Hein wie sagt Rashi, how could Rashi say, as to leave them either from Korach? And because of Korach's argument, Bo HaKosu, the Eibishter has given him 24, the Eibishter has not given him 24. In the Pasuk, it doesn't say 24. But more than that, the Tmi is no aggressive. The surprise is even greater. If Rashi is agez, about the first shearing Israel Chaim Keva, or the Torah erst angesagt später in Parshas Shoftim. The Torah first tells us the Parsha Shoftim. It's not even told over here. So what is Rashi? Not only in this Parsha, it doesn't say till Parsha Shoftim. So why does Rashi have to say Chav Daled and the Chav Daled are not even given at the time? The Rebbe says we can see another change in the Lashon of the Sifri and Lashon Rashi. Maybe that will explain to us possibly why Rashi says Rashi says the Pasuk gave them the 24 kuna, and in the Sifri it says Hamokim, the Eibishter gave it to them. Because the real question is in the Sifri, it seems to imply that this whole portion, Hashem is speaking to Aaron, was said at that time. Over there it says Nemra. In Rashi it says Nismacha, which implies it wasn't said that, but the Torah set it up over here. If the Torah, if this is when the Eibishter said it to him, so then you're saying that Mokim gave it to him. But if it's Nismacha, but it was said elsewhere, that's why it's the Kosim. Let's look inside. The question we have in Rashi's language, Rashi says the Pasuk gives it to him. Kemen Zogen, we can say, Ados is verbunden mit noch Hashinu Loshon in Pirush Rashi legabe dem Sifri. Another change of language in Rashi's commentary relative to the Sifri. Is Sifri is our Messiah, the Sifri concludes, Lekach Nemra Parsha Zu Samach Lekerach. That's why this portion was said next to Korach. But Rashi is Meshana for Sifri. Rashi changes in Sifri und sagt, Ulekach Nismecha Parsha Zu Lekan. That's why this portion has been brought close here. So what's the difference? The chiluk zwischen the zwei Lashonos, Nemra and Nismecha bepashtus is, what's the difference if we say that it was said or it was brought in close? Nemra Parsha Zu Samach Lekerach, like in the Sifri that it was said, meint as he is gesagt geworden besmicha zu dem Ura von Korach. That means that it was said close to the happening of the story of Korach. But when Rashi says it was brought closer, meant the smichas haparsha in Torah. That means that the Torah brought it closer, not that Hashem brought it here, but the Torah writes it over here. This was written in Torah, this spot. Aber gesagt geworden ist, wie früher oder später. Said it could have been said before or later. Und wie bald as Rashi nimmt on, and since Rashi accepts as the parsha is not nismechol lekan, that this portion is only close to here, therefore is a medayik. That's why he says specifically, the pasuk, because that's the pasuk is written close to here. But that's on zog von die Matnes Kuna was steht in der Parsha, the actual command of the Parshas Kahuna that this Parsha states is nit gekommen be'emshech zu Ma'aseh Korach. That did not come as a follow-up to the story of Korach, that story itself. Nor the Torah, Kosuv, the Torah has written this, is masmich. The Parsha brings the portion closer to learn and to teach us as the Nisina for the Matnas Kahuna bebris Melech Oila. That the Eibishter gave this Matanas Kahuna in a bris Melech Oilam. So the Torah writes that gift that was said elsewhere, given elsewhere. The Torah records it over here to teach us that that is mevatel, that negates the Efsharius from an Idur of Kahuna and a possibility to complain, to argue, to challenge the Kahuna. Okay, so Nismacha fits with Kosuv, and Nemra fits with Hamokoy. But that alone we need to know. How does Rashi know that this pasuk is only Nismacha? As bleibt aber nicht move on, how gufa time a boy. This itself needs a reason. How does Rashi in Pshutisha Mikra know this? As the parsha is nicht gesagt, that the portion was not said, und the Far euch geschrieben geworden, bis Michas zum Meister Korach. How does he know that? That it wasn't said and written both. It's written next to Korach because it happened next to Meister Korach. Wie die Sefri learn, as Sefri. How does Rashi know that it was said elsewhere? And the Torah put it over here specifically to teach us that there's no eater against the Kohen. So now the Rebbe says, well, maybe we can answer it with a further difference between the Sifri and the Rashi. Because here in the Parsha, I've given you, it's mashma that we're talking about all of the Matnos Kahuna. And the problem is that according to the Sifri, they're actually in the Parsha later on, all the Matnos Kahuna are mentioned. But according to Rashi, as we'll see in a minute, we don't count all Matnos Kahuna. And therefore, Rashi, who doesn't have all the 24 Matnos Kahuna, and the Pasuk seal says Ani in Inosati, so Rashi learns that this was said later on, this whole, and the Pasuk is just Kosuv over here versus the Sifri. But the Rebbe says we can't say that. Let's look inside. Dalit. It seems like we could have said that this hinges on an additional difference between the Sifri and the Pirush Rashi. First to introduce, from Pashtus Loshna Kosov, from the simple language in the Pasuk. The Pasuk uses the Loshon of Kol Trumes HaKadoshim Nosati L'chok Goymer L'chok Oilom Bris Melech Goymer is mashma. The fact that the Pasuk says all of the Trumes HaKadoshim I've given to you for an eternal statue. So it talks about Kol is mashmas dos batzitzach, that this refers to nit nor a fatel, not just on a portion, or if alle matnis kahuna, but on all the gifts of kahuna. Is mashmas dos batzitzich nit nor a fatel, so that it doesn't just refer to a portion, nor if alle matnis kahuna, but on all gifts of kahuna. Und euch von dem teuchene Ian is also from the content of the idea over here, it appears so. Warum is nicht talking Svarim Mechalik sein? Because there is no logical reason to differentiate the Matnes Kahuna and Zogen, the gifts of Kahuna, and to say, as bloß a Teil von sie ist gegeben geworden mit Abris Malachoilam, that only a portion of them was given with this covenant of an eternal covenant, that only some of them. If he said therefore is kumen, so since everything was given, so therefore it turns out, as when the parsha is gesagt geworden, that when the portion was told, is man schon nicht stave geworden from früher, if alle of the matnes kahuna, you were already commanded earlier for all the 24 gifts of kahuna. Unloit dem zog der Pasuk, and according to that, the Pasuk says, as called to rumors, hakodoshim goyim osati l'chol goyim b'risoi melech, that all of these trumas hakodoshim that we've already been commanded, I'm giving it to you as a bris melech olam, as an eternal covenant. Und der Chiluk zwischen dem Sifri and Rashi is in them. And what is the difference between Sifri and Rashi? Is in them oifun posuk kol chelev yitzor goymer reshis mashayitnu laHashem l'chon nesati. When the posuk says kol chelev yitzor, The Reshis Mashiyit Lashem Lechon Nisatim steht in Sifri. What is Reshisom? Zureshis Agiz Asher Yitnu Ze Azroy V'Lachayim V'Akeva, which means that in the pasuk of Chelev Yitzor, from the oil that we give, the matone that you give, the ma'aser that you give to the kohen, is reishisom, is taiches, reishis agez, asher yitnu zroy l'chaim v'keva, la Hashem zuchala. So it turns out that we have the rest of the four gifts that are not the Fedish mentioned in the pasuk, in the words asher yitnu la Hashem l'chon esatim, asher yitnu la Hashem. Das heißt, as in der Parsha Gufa stehen schon Halach of the Matnas Kuna. That means that in this Parsha itself already all the 24 gifts of Kuna already stated. The Rebbe learned der Sifri. That's why the Sifri learns as the Parsha wo steht wegen dem Bris Melech Olam, that the portion that it said no is Nemra. Though he says Nemra was said because right here, everything, all the 24, the Kol, everything was said over here. Ashenkin, like Rashi, as opposed according to Rashi, was break nish the drosha. Now he does not bring that drosha, that the including in the pasuk reishisom asher titnu is the other matnas kuna v'adrab is mefarish reishisom. He says reishisom truma gedoyla. That means the truma gedoyla. Und der chiyuv for reishis agez uzroy l'chaim v'keva basement. How do we know about the obligation of Reshis Hagez Zroy L'Chayim Keva? Basement nicht von der Parsha. We don't know it from this portion, nor erst from Parsha's Shoftim. We know it in portion of Shoftim. Musmen Zogun. So therefore, we have to say, as the Parsha wegen Bris Melech Olam, that the portion of Bris Melech Olam is nicht gesagt geworden bis Miches zu Meister Korach, because otherwise you wouldn't have 24. Cannot be that it was said next to the story of Korach. Wenn sie ist noch nicht gewähnt der Chiyuv von allem Matnas Kuna, there was not yet the obligation von allem Matnas Kuna, nor erst noch Parshas Shoftim, but only after the Parshas Shoftim. But we know that everything in Torah was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, as Rashi has said, but this would be an exception. So this was not given yet, so this is later. That's what Rashi says, Nemru, that Nichtavu, because it was not said till later on. Unafal P, the Rebbe adds in the brackets, as Rashi already explained earlier. As Kulam Nemru Klolis saying B'Dikdukei Misinai, that all of the mitzvahs, the tzivuyim of the Torah, already the general and the specifically were said from Sinai. Zog doch Rashi, aber Rashi in Parshas Shoftim, yet Rashi does say in Parshas Shoftim, as the maton is Zroy L'chaim V'Kevo, that these gifts of the Zroy L'chaim V'Kevo, seine gekumen ve'asachar, they came as a reward, as a payment for Ma'aseh Pinchas, for what Pinchas did. Zroya tachas yad, the hand, vayikach yodei raimach l'chaim, tachas tefilo, the cheek, because he prayed, that he stuck into kabasa. The spirit is bepashtus. So simply, we would learn mistaber zu sagen. It's logical to say, as damals noch Ma'aseh Pinchas is nischadish geworden sehr chiyuv. Then this, after the story of Pinchas, was a new chiyuv, and this was not said from Sinai, this particular. Und der Pfarrer sagt Rashi, lekach nismucha pasha zu lekan. That's where it says it's brought here, but it was said later on. So everything, it's nismecha, because the pasuk says kol, so it has to be all. According to Rashi, they're not mentioned over here, so we have to say it means another tzivui, but it was just written over here to tell us the eater of the kuna. But the actual tzivui happened after the Parshas Pinchas. But the Rebbe says, no, we can't say that. Hey, aber kadaikis kemen as nitzogen. But if you look into it, you can't really say so. Vile. Several problems. Turns out that we waited all this time for Hashem to seal the deal till after Parsha Shoftim. Long time. As the Parsha is gesagt worden, erst noch Parsha Shoftim, if we should assume that this portion was said only after Parsha Shoftim, or that I'll call upon him noch Maise Pinchas, or at least it was said after the story with Pinchas. So then it comes out as der Melech hat abgewahrt mit dem Koisev v'choisem lecho umala berkoyim. That the king, the Eibishter, in the Moshul, waited with writing and signing it to you and to ratify it in court, in order to protect from a possibility of complaints, as it was 38 years, 38 Jahr, noch an Irur von Korach, after Korach's complaining. Because that is when the story with Pinchas, it happened at the end. And in the meantime, if the Eibishter wants to ratify it, then that's why the Eibishter is giving him the kuna. Seems like he waited an awful long time to do that. Beis, the Iker, the main thing is, but in Pasuk from der Parsha steht doch. What does it say in the Pasuk in this Parsha? By Daber goimer el Aren. It says, Va'ani hinei nosati l'cho, I've given to you. The Eibishter says, as der nosati versus koilel al l'chov daled matnas kuna kenal, that I've given to you, which means I've given to you all the 24 matnas kuna, koil, we said, is l'cho to Aaron. The Eibishter gave it to him, to Aaron, while Aaron was still alive. Ubemele farder meise Pinchas was his vorgekommen noch Mrs. Aaron. That took place already after the story of Aaron's death, as we learn in the Parshas Chukas. But in Pinchas, of Aaron's passing. And this took place later. So how could it be Lecho that the Eibishter only after Pinchas? Uns is auf dem kein Stirren nicht. Das von was Rashi sagt. How are you going to say Rashi says befedish that there was a reward? How could it be given to Lecho when Rashi says later on that it was given to Pinchas as a reward? So it's not a contradiction that von was Rashi sagt as roya chulu seine scharfa meise Pinchas genau that is a reward for meise Pinchas. Weil man kann sagen, because one can say that it was given to Aaron because of the merit of Pinchas in the future. Al derech wie Rashi hat schon gesagt, hat schon früher mefarish gewesen, when he gave to Yitzias Mitzrayim. Rashi already said earlier with regard to the exodus of Egypt, as is given in schus from the spetedike Kabbalah Satoira, that they went out of Mitzrayim in the merit of accepting the Torah later on. So Aaron got the boon and the merit because of Pinchas later on. So therefore, kann man doch nicht sagen, as the Parsha is gesagt geworden, viel später noch Meise Korach. So you can't say that it was said much later than the story of Korach. Und für sie kommt euch verkehrt. So it turns out the opposite. Ados was Rashi sagt, nismecho lekan nit nemro. Why is it nismecho nit nemro? Is weil halt as the Parsha is gesagt geworden, lifnei inyan Korach, that it happened before Korach, not after. It had to happen before. That's why it was only nismecho and not nemro. Isn't it? Move on to now. So the question we asked before, as asked earlier, from Vanet is Rashi's hechrech. What forces Rashi b'pshuta shemikra? And the simple meaning of the pasuk to learn as the Parsha is gesagt geworden früher, that really was said before. Blois nismecha lekan, it was only brought close over here. Oizvav, Yishleimer Habir Bazel. So the Rebbe says we can say this is the explanation. In the psukim for the Parsha kommt nit zu loy pshuta shel mikra. In these verses in our Parsha, the way we learn it in Pshat, kein ein matone Not even one gift was is nicht angesagt geworden schön früher, which has not been already instructed before. Das was es ist zugekommen, what came about in this parsha is the Haskola Visim, is the beginning and the end. Number one, as the Matnish Kahuna seine gegeben geworden Aaron one of Lemoshcha, that they were given to Aaron and his son Lemoshcha for Gedula, Besium, and also that what we have in the end, that it was Lechok Olam Bris Melech Olam. It was given for an eternal statue, like a covenant of eternity with Melech Olam. Musman Zogan. So therefore, we need to say, Ados was der Posik zogt, Vani hine nosati goimer, meint nicht as git itzt odi matonis. It doesn't mean that I'm giving it now, not as kvar nosati ba'ovar, but that I've given it in the past. As the Rebbe will explain why we have to say that everything was already given before. Under Fall is mestaber zu sagen b'derech hapshat. That's why it's logical to say, according to the Pshat, as the psukim for their parsha, that these verses in this parsha was werden ausgerechnet beprotis the matnes kahuna, which detail specifically the matnes kahuna seine nicht gesagt geworden da. They weren't said over here, nor nismachal lekan. They were just brought close here. The Torah hat da geschrieben, the frier dike the borim shalakodesh baruch Hu. The Torah had written here those things that have already been written, spoken by Hashem. Wegen the matonis welche nosati kvar, that those gifts that the Eibishter has given were recorded over here. That which Hashem has said before. Masha'enkin loitun sifri was learned, as opposed to the sifri was learns, as in deep sukim does and merumes euch reishis ages unzreya l'chaim v'keva, that it's also hinted the gez reishis ages and reya l'chaim from the posik was seine noch nicht gestanden in posik frier canal. They have not yet been written in the posik earlier. Is the parsha gesagt geworden da? Then this parsha was actually here to make up to Maslim sein dem inyan von Matnish Kahuna, this idea of the Matnish Kahuna. Euch die, wo seine bisher nicht gestanden in Posik. Also those that have up till now not been written the Posik, because according to them, they're included over here. So they're brought here, the extras that have not been mentioned. Und afal pi, as euch leit Rashi is the Krisus Beris, if Matnas Guna gesagt worden kann, that this is here told now, the formation of that covenant for the Matnas Guna was said here, is over Leut Rashi, according to Rashi, Negeya, in the Inyan from Bittel of Shorish Le'irur, in order to take away the possibility, to negate the possibility to complain, nit nor the Krisus Bris of Matnas Kahuna. It is not just important the Krisus Bris for Matnas Kahuna, nor euch the Nisina for Matnas Kahuna, the Belkama Barucha, but also that the Eibishter is giving of the Matnas Kahuna. So that is part to the Lakam Baruch. The Rebbe is Rashi Medayik, and that's why Rashi says specifically, Bo hakosu v'nosan loy, ulekach nismecha parshas ulekach, that the posik comes here and gave him, and this parsha was brought here because this is important. Saying the Bris Melech Olam, yes, but also the fact that the Torah put it here to give them, that is important to negate the Irur. Val benegeya der nisinas hamatos kuna because as far as giving the kohuna, that was not done over here. That over here, that pasuk is just coming. The pasuk gave him the kosim that sailed do back in the nesina from prayer. Here, the pasuk is telling us what was given before. Zayin, the bir b'chose. The pashater taish von hine is al derech v'hineni. Hine is the short version of hineni. The kitzer shel hine ani. Behold, I am. Odo, I'm ready. Muchanu mezuma, prepared and ready. V'hine vi, as we find. Hine ishtcha kachvale. Here is your wife. Take her and go. Vayera vayar v'hine, and behold, there is a ayah. Ready, all ready to go, ready to take. If you're talking about an act that you're going to do, or the was mahod or that you already did, weiß der Wort hine, so then the word hine shows if der hachone von dem was tut die Pula. The person, the preparedness, the preparation of the one who's doing the act. As er is muchadersu, he's ready. So why do we have to say ready? Why is it important to emphasize readiness? He says, usually, we're talking about an act which is a novelty. Unlike what it seemingly should be. Say, for example, I'm going to bring the flood. This is a novelty. This is the opposite that was stated earlier. He's see that everything that Hashem has done is Tov, and now all of a sudden, Hineni, I'm ready to do the opposite, a chiddush, destroy the world. But Toimer Sorai says, Hine, no atzura neshem melachas. Behold, what is he ready? Which is against, opposite of the nature of women to have children. And so she says, Hine, no. Eibishter stopped me. Especially in the case of Avram and Sarai. The Eibishter promised, so will be your seed. So, and all of a sudden there's no children. So that's a chiddush. Hinei, no atzura neshem miladis. Al derech ze in under Seder Gufa, we find in our Seder itself, V'ani hinei lokachti es achichem halevim goimer lochem matona. I behold, I've taken your Levim brothers given to the Kohanim as a gift to serve them. Afal pi as ato uvanecho tisra savoina mikdash goyim. Even though you and your sons will be the one that will carry this sin for the mikdash, the Kohanim, as shmiras hamikdash ota shayches to Kohanim dafki, that guarding the Mishkan is something which is connected to Kohanim. Afal pikein hinei lokachti. Lokachti is achichem alavim to help the Kohanim. I took them out to help the Kohanim. Oh, but in our case, impossible. We don't have any novelty here that is the opposite of before. What is the language over here of hine? Hine nosati. How is this explained here? As Mishmeres Trumoisa, what's the opposite over here? What is the chiddush over here? The Rebbe sagt Rashi Loshin Simcha Huzeh. It's a language of Simcha. As Bishas is Farana Simcha in the minyan. When there is a joy in this matter, is massing the Loshin Hine, then it is fitting the language of Hine. Afilu when is nito in der Pa'ula ken chiddush, even when the act There's no novelty there. While this simcha by apula, because when you're rejoicing by the act, brings zrizas, that brings alacrity. Haisofa brings addition. In the greatkeit zu ton die Sache and the preparedness to do it. Und der Fahr passt der Rück, the Loshen Hine, Muchen Mezuma. That's why it fits, ready, prepared, ready of joy. Dabei stellt sich aber die Scheile. So, but the question is, wo sieht man as den Sinas Matnes Kohuna is given besimcha? Where do we see that it was with joy? Where is it the joy over here? Noch bet. Von dem Gufe, was nur in gezählte Erter Wert auf derach Abschad genutzt der Wort Hine, als a Loshe for Simcha, the fact that only in very selected places in the Torah Hine is a Simcha, is Muchach Ados is Amiut Anoistam, mean that's a minority, it's an exception. So there has to be a Simcha Shel Chidush, a great joy, because otherwise we would have other cases of joy would have Hine, but we don't have Hine often. That must be an exceptional Simcha. But where do we find a Simcha, an exceptional Simcha by Ani Hine Nasati Lecha? Where is the joy here? Und we find this in the Pasuk was Rashi bringt als Rai. And we find this in the Pasuk that there's exceptional joy in that Pasuk that Rashi brings as evidence. Hinehu yoytze likrosecho beracho v'somach b'libai. He is coming towards you. Aaron is coming towards you. And he'll see you. He'll be rejoicing. Aaron will be very happy for you. As nit kokendig was hu Aaron yoytze likrosecho. Notwithstanding that Aaron is coming towards you, Moshe shall Yisrael, and Moshe is going to become the redeemer of the Yidden, which is contrary to the honor of the older brother of Aaron. Afal Pikain, and yet he knew this will not bring out Aaron to be upset, angry, or similar to that, nor adrab. He'll see you and he'll be happy in his heart. So wo zet man a simcha gedoyla by giving the matnes kuna? So that's why Rashi says there was a tremendous benefit. If them bring to Rashi, that's what Rashi brings us, that the inyan from matnas kahana hat euch aufgetan die Größe to Ellis. What it accomplished is the great benefits to mevatlu shel zayin an irur of kahuna, to negate and to reject any complaints, any challenge to kahuna. Und die größte simcha bei den Esinas matonas kahuna, what is the great joy by giving these gifts of kahuna, drift sich in them, expresses in the fact was noch them, after Korach came and challenged against Aaron the Kuna. The pasuk comes, V'nosan loy chov daled matnes kuna. Why is Rashi mentioned? 24 matnes kuna. Aribu matonis, a tremendous amount of matonis. We just learned as Kidei Tzubavor Nazidin's own vision that in order to forewarn and caution that Yidden should know that I have chosen that Kohen Aaron, they were not going to complain anymore. Is given genug ein Pula was enough one act, Korach mat Aaron, in which Aaron's staff blossomed. Und da gibt man zu lieb dem selben Inyan. And here you give Chov Dalet Matas Kuna, you give 24. Tremendous amount. Das ist aber weiß, this is a proof that this is given, nicht stamanisina, not just giving. Auf zu bewohnen and dem Irur, in order to make sure that it's not going to be a complaint, because we already had one to prove that. But this was just a great amount of giving was weist as it kommt mit der Simcha, which proves that it comes from Simcha. So, according to Rashi, the fact that he's giving him Chov Daled Matnes Kuhuna, that's the way that Hashem is fending off any irur. But in Sifri, what fends off the irur is not the chavdal, is not all matnas kihuna. What fends off the irur is the bris olam, that it's eternity. Test. According to this, it turns out, as is Farana Chilik zwischen Rashi and Sifri, that there's a difference between Rashi and Sifri. Durch was is me mevatel the efshorius leirur? How do we negate the possibility for challenge? In Sifri werde der Mond bloß wegen der Minion von Christus Brisemat. In the Sifri, it just mentions about the forming of the covenant with Adam, Bris Melechel, Al Kol Kodesh HaKadoshim, on all the holies. That covenant, as the Christus Bris is mevatel the efshorius leirur, the fact that there is a covenant that takes away the possibility of complaint. But according to Rashi, it turns out, there were two things here. Levatel the efshorius, to take away the possibility of complaint. The pasuk is coming here. We're giving him now the matnas kuna, which means we're writing it down as a point, even though they were given before, but the pasuk is saying it now. And bevris malacholam, two things. The far is Rashi Mishanim for Sifri, and that's what Rashi changes Sifri on his medayik. Kosuv v'nosan lechud. The pasuk gave him l'kach nismach parsha zuluk, and that's why this parsha is brought closer. But the etzem nisina matnes kehuna, because this is not what was given now. That was already given before. Shegeven freer, farn irushal Korach, before the complaint of Korach. Says norvas bo hakosuv v'nosan chulu kenal sivov. But it's only that the pasuk is coming here and gave it to him. The pasuk giving him, writing it down over here, and that shows the lack of irur that can be from the what the Eibush is given before. And damit wird euch verstandig. Now we can also understand why Rashi da b'chlal bringing the moshel mit alle seine protim. Why Rashi needs to bring this example with all the details. L'chayre, it would seem Rashi zog blois dem nimshol. If Rashi would have just said nimshol, the fish shabo Korach, ve'irer keneged arin ala kohuna, because he complained, so the Eibishter gave him the 24 matnas kahuna. The pasuk comes and gives him 20 matnas. What do you need a marshal for? Well, God had gefelt there would be nothing lacking in understanding. Why do we need a marshal? What is it added by the marshal, by the king that said that in as the Moshel stated in the Sifri, although this Moshel is stated in the Sifri, is doch nicht in Yonish Rashi zu meitig sein der Rosh from the Sifri, but Rashi doesn't just quote the expounding of the Sifri. Ubefrat as benitten sei, überhaupt nicht mit sein der Sifri als Mokel Perusha, especially in our case, he doesn't even at all reference the Sifri that is the source to his commentary. So why would he bring it down? No, der meat is Rashi oisen zum Mevair sein, but Rashi is coming to intention is to explain why we needed both matters. Giving him the 24 matnas kehuna, and this covenant for eternity. And furthermore, as it must be given, der frier diker that it wasn't sufficient, the previous sign and the proof from the Porach Mata Aaron, that we needed further. As geshem being moshel fodern sich drei in yonim, just like in the example, we have all three things. Aleph koisav, you write it. Beis koisav, you sign it. Umayla ber koim, you ratify it in court. Al derech zeh zeh nimshal, similar as mentioned. The sinas chov daled matnas kehuna, the giving of the 24 matnas, bedugmas koisav, that is similar to writing it down. The krisis bris, forming the covenant, that that's signing it, sealing the deal. Und der Bris in Anoif Melech Olam, and when we make the covenant in such a way that it's eternal, and that is the third example in the Mashal that you ratified in the courts, as the Rebbe will explain now. The three accomplishment: writing, signing, and ratifying it. Yud. Der Eufen von Ashtar, the accomplishment when you write a document, Kosev, is as the Bala Sodot Araya, as the field belongs to him. The owner of the field has evidence that the field belongs to him. Even when he finds himself in a distant place from the field. When he is in and around his field, it's not so important to protect from somebody challenging. An Eder is Beikir Olu, when is mainly a challenge bound to take place, when he distances himself from his field. That is taken care of when having a document. Similar is the nimshal. In order for the kahanim, wherever they find themselves, not only when they do the service in the Beis Hamikdash. So they should have evidence that their kahanim Hashem is their far. For that, he gave them the 24 matnas kuna. Several of the 24 matnas kuna they are not connected with the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim specifically. And by some of them is the chiva filu b'chutz. Some of the 24 obligations also outside Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so that's why that's writing. Matnas Kuna includes that when you're in a distant, you still have proof. But Koisav Alein is not must because it's not sufficient. But Aleph, Kozman der Star is nit chosum. As long as the document is not signed, is the Sach noch nicht verendigt. The item, it's not yet completed. Und der Neusen can charotom, the giver can retract, can change his mind. Beis, afilu noch dem wieder choisen bavornt. Even after he signs and he makes sure as the Neusen it can charotom that the giver should not be able to retract, is aber noch da a Möglichkeit, still a possibility is somebody should say, no, this is a false starter, or it's a complaint. And negate the start. Was to leave them, darf the starter haben, keep the best, and that's why it needed to be ratified in court, und da sind die zwei Unionen von Bris, der in your covenant, der in von Chosem that signs, Melech Olam and Melech Olam, eternity, the take from Malaber Koyin, the force that it's ratified in court. The Eibishter at Kodesh Bris given mit Aaron. The Eibishter formed the covenant with Aaron as the Inyan HaKahuna von Aaron Mizane Achrov. That the idea of the Kahuna von Aaron and seed after him is in an Oifun, as in them at Nizayin Ken Shinui Charot, and this will be no change. There will be no regrets. We see that it was already happened, a regret that the Eibshter took away the Avodah from B'chodes. So that is the bris, as Kendochaber Zayin, as Aval Pi Mitzad dem Neusen, even though that from the side of the giver, Bet Nitzayin Charotoi from the Inyan HaKuna, will not be a retraction of the Kuna, but Ober Kuman Matzev. But maybe there'll come a condition was can goyim sein dem bittel from klolos in hakuna that can cause the negation from the general idea of kuna al derech hanidrei fashtar, similar to a challenge to a shtar. It's not just a matter of changing the mind, but the whole idea of kuna to negate. In other words, to take away will be no more kahanim. Seriously, his bottle, and that happens when there's no Beis Hamikdash. is but Mishchar Beis Hamikdash. She's Nichayich Avedus HaKahanim. This doesn't apply the service of Kahanim. Is L'chayra Batel Chaz V'Shalom D'Inyan Kahuna. That would mean that the Kahuna is Batel. And that would be Al Derech V'D'Inyan HaMalchus, similar to the idea of kingdom. Was is gegeben geworden to Shevet Yehuda. That was given to the tribe of Yehuda. Und steht Le'Yosef Shevet Yehuda, that they will not be taking away a ruler of Yehuda. Aber Apel Pikein is gekumen azman from Bitl HaMelucha. But then there came a time when there is no government at all. It came Elohim. Und afile nit Rosh Golius. We don't have any kings. We don't even have a head of exiles. So if them is gesagt worden the bris and ha'ifim from Melech Olam. That's why it's said in a covenant of Melech Olam. Akrisus bis bedover haborium miskayim she'enim masriach lo'ilum. As Rashi says, making a covenant with salt covenant means it's a forming in something which is healthy and stays fresh, never protrudes. Salt, the dugmas, ma'ile berkoim vastutu evdim kimer shtar. That accomplishes the sustaining of the shtar. Pirush Rashi and doch Farani flows wondrous things in Rashi's commentary. From alle Chelek Torah, the whole section of Torah, Yesh Leimar. So we can say from the Niflois and then Pirush Rashi, the wonderful thing in this Rashi, Bittel Ir Urei Shel Korach, the negation of Korach's challenge is verbunden mit Matnes Kuna Davke in the Mispah von Dalet, that is connected with gifts, specifically 24. Korach's Irur of Kunas Arn is given by official Geneva. This challenge wasn't a way of theft. Nit Amerida keged dem Obersten in an open way. It didn't rebel against Hashem in an open way. Vigzela, similar to Ra. Gzela versus Ravili versus Bereish Gilei, which is done openly. Nor verstelt. He committed his complaint that he disguised it. Areingegangen in a tiny sichus. He stole it into a logical argument. Rab lochem ki kol eido kulum gedeshim goimer. It's enough to you, all are holy. Included that in there. As Kol Ha'ida, he gathered all the community. He went to the tribes, and he persuaded them. Until they all persuaded. All tribes became partners, participants in this theft. They all had to pay double. Shnai Misham, you got to pay double. 12 tribes, 2 times 12 is 24. Chov Dalet, 12 mol kef, 12 mol kefo, 12 times twice, Chov Dalet matnas. The Lechera, Korach v'Shevet Levi zayin doch givem Rosh HaMaradim. So there's a 13th tribe. There's also the tribe of Levi, because he was from the main complainers was actually Korach and Levi. So there was 13, so it should be 26. Why 24? There should have been 26 gifts of Kuba. But because the intent of Matnas Kuna is to provide Nanirur Ba'osid, is to prevent a challenge in the future. The king told him, anybody who wants to come and complain. If you have anybody who's going to come to complain, who's going to complain? We're not going to worry. No more Korach worry. We're only worried about the other tribes of an Shevet Levi. This is Muchar, the form was Mata Shevet Levi, is thus Mata Aaron. I didn't say a separate for Aaron. The Mata Aaron Shevet Levi is Aaron. No, this shows them. Was is Adrab B'nei Yisrael. So Levi isn't going to argue anymore. That was that exception by Korach. So because that was the evidence part of Mata Aaron. So Oynish Korach Vavadosei, that coming from Korach itself, he got his punishment. That took away that. That took away the possibility of a challenge from Bnei Levi. They became one. They became one tribe with Mataharim. Then you have to only caution of the complaints of the other tribes, which is 12. 12 times 2, the kefil is 24. Yud Beis, Mekenda, Chaber Fregen, you can still ask. Einer for Matnes Kuna is Trumas Meiser. Trumas Meiser is not something which is given by the Levi. Was does give nit Yisraelim, nor blois Levim. They give Meiser min ha Meiser. Well, Levim to Daber Lemer. Kommt to us. As alle Yud Beis Shvotim give blois Chav Gimel Matnes Kuna. That the 12 tribes are only giving 23, not the 24th. No, dor zetman wieder. Here we see again the Eichle Pshuta Shal Mikra is als meduyik. That even in the simple pshat in the pasuk is precise. By Trumas Meiser zog the pasuk zweimal. Pasuk is twice. That does come from the Meiser was tikchu meis b'nei Yisrael. Where do the Levim have the truma to give to the Kohanim from the Meiser meis b'nei Yisrael? What is the emphasis and the duplication? As their Meiser comes from the Bnei Yisrael, that it comes from Israel. Their meat is the Pasuk Madgish. The Pasuk emphasizes with this. From Trumas Meiser is Chalev der Tvua, that the obligation of Tvuas, Trumas Meiser on the grain basis is not B'Reshus Yisrael. Technically, it's the Jewish gift, is the Yisrael's gift. It's the gift of the Yisrael. That's the obligation. But the Levi does mafresh bepoil when he gets it. He gets the Meiser there, he gives it. But it's still considered to be a gift of the Yid. That's why it's part of the Chavdalah. Was those Gita Hasborin them din. This explains the halacha yesh le'rishus le'balabayis litrem trumas meiser, that the owner has a right to give the trumas meisers. When the hastit can totem shleimedas, it doesn't consider him that he gives it without the permission of the one who has to give the meiser. While the chiyu from trumas meiser, because the obligation of trumas meiser is mitzad dem meiser, mitzad dem was the meiser kommt meis bnei Yisrael, because it comes from the Yid. When the chiv is shinchal, when the tvu is given b'reshus Yisrael, that obligation already rests when it's in the possession when the Yid owned it. Kumtois, so it turns out as alle Chavdalah Matas Kunas and a Shaykh to Yisraelim, all the 24 Matas Kuna belong to the Yisraelim. Even the one that the Levi gets, it's really a matone from the Yisrael. Yud Gimel, Parshas Korach lent men Chodesh Tammuz. Parshas Korach you read in the month of Tammuz, or the B'Shabbos Mevorchim Chodesh Tammuz, or on the Shabbos Mevorchim Chodesh Tammuz, the Chodesh HaGeula from the Rebbe and the Shver, the month of redemption of the Rebbe the Shver. Eine from the Remozim of Zamayit Geula. One of the hints for his incarceration, redemption, is in them Pirush Rashi, is in this commentary of Rashi. In Belchel Menzet, in which you see, as that Erer from Korach, that the challenge of Korach had nit lois nit abgeschwacht Kuras Aaron. Not only did it not weaken the Aaron's Kohuna, but Adrabe. So it brought about a tremendous force, to an external covenant, similar to, say, when a document has been challenged, was this kind of Bezdin, and it was ratified in Bezdin, so then there can be no more challenges. Derech is given by Rebbe. Similarly, it was by the Rebbe. As Davke durch dem Irur, that it's specifically through this complaint from the Meiser of the incarceration is Gekumen de Geula, then came about the redemption. So it versichert, that guaranteed as ein avodah shel abotzes haTorah, that his work of spreading Torah, the chizuk hayadus and strengthening Yiddishkeit, went ongoing, will continue in an oifen from bris oilam, from an eternal covenant, and with the greater advantage than before, in an oifen in such a way as the mayones al Torah on kennen the Grechen. The well springs of Torah should be able to reach the whole katzvi table, to the ends of the world. Azoi, in such a way as the Geula is a achona kroiva, that redemption is a close preparing it to the Geula Mitzvah Vashlema V'Achlolis, to the true and complete and general Geula, the Mashiach Tzidkeinu B'Meheru Yemenu Mamash. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Korach v'Shabbos Parshas Chukas Tovshin Chof Zayin.